Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're doing something really fun. We are mapping out the explosive economic revolution of professional football, but we're looking at it through a very specific and honestly a highly visible lens, the cars the players drove. We're going to trace the direct, tangible link between the history of football wages and the wild transition from athletes struggling to keep used sedans on the road to global icons collecting multi-million-dollar fleets. It is a fascinating story of labor, leverage, and of course luxury.
Okay, let's dive right into this. How exactly did the athletes of the world's most popular sport transform their economic reality so drastically? Because for decades, professional footballers were basically working-class laborers. I mean, they took public transit to games right alongside the fans, and they drove really modest, affordable vehicles. Fast forward to the modern era, and the world's top players are driving customized supercars that cost more than a dozen houses put together. So what was the tipping point? To understand this massive economic shift, we really have to start by looking at what life was actually like before all that wealth poured in.
Just take a look at the reality for a young Harry Redknapp, playing for West Ham back in the late 1960s. He bought this beautiful, bright red 1961 Jaguar from a senior teammate for just £250. He thought he was getting the deal of a lifetime, right? But it was a complete disaster. Redknapp tells this charmingly embarrassing story of going out on a Friday night with his teammates, and the Jaguar wouldn't start. They literally had to get towed up the high street by a police car just to get the engine running. And it gets worse. On his honeymoon to Torquay, the car constantly overheated and the head gasket completely blew on the way home. He just couldn't afford to fix it, so he had to sell it off for cheap. It's a funny story, but it perfectly captures the reality of a professional footballer at the time. They might have wanted to live a glamorous lifestyle, but their bank accounts simply wouldn't allow it.
Because you see, the gritty, pre-wealth reality of English football was that it was practically a semi-professional gig. Players very often needed side hustles just to make ends meet. Take Ted Ditchburn, for example. He was this incredibly prominent goalkeeper for Tottenham Hotspur and the England national team. Yet, despite playing at the absolute pinnacle of the sport, Ditchburn had to run his own ticket agency as a second job. Can you imagine a top Premier League goalkeeper today running a side business just to supplement their income? No way. It's unthinkable now. But back then, it was literally just survival.
Now you're probably wondering, why on earth were they so broke? Well, it all comes down to the maximum wage cap, which was imposed by the Football Association. And this wage cap was an agonizingly slow crawl. In 1920, the absolute maximum a player could earn was £9 a week. 27 years later, in 1947, it had barely moved, creeping up to just £12 a week. By 1958, it was capped at £20. And here's the crazy part. This extreme wage suppression was happening while post-war English football was experiencing an absolute boom. We're talking about stadium attendances peaking at 20 to 30 million people over the course of a single year. The clubs were raking in massive gate receipts, but the players, the actual product the fans came to see, were legally barred from getting a fair slice of the pie.
So clearly, something had to give. Enter the AFPU, the Professional Football Players Union. It had originally been established years earlier to protect players' employment rights, but it was in 1957, when a prominent figure named Jimmy Hill was appointed chairman, that things really started to heat up. Hill became this crucial organized force, pushing back against the strict salary caps of the Football Association. The players realized that without collective bargaining, they were going to be stuck making £20 a week forever. The tension was building, and a major confrontation was absolutely inevitable.
So, the crucial point is this big bang moment of football economics that arrived on January 14, 1961. Jimmy Hill and the Players' Union drew a hard line in the sand, threatening a massive, league-wide player strike. They demanded the right to negotiate contracts just like any other profession. Faced with the terrifying prospect of empty stadiums and absolutely zero gate receipts, the Football League caved. The maximum wage was officially abolished. The dam had finally burst.
And wow, the impact was literally instantaneous. Almost immediately after that cap was lifted in 1961, Fulham's star player Johnny Haynes signed a groundbreaking new deal. He became the very first English player to earn £100 per week. Practically overnight, the ceiling was shattered, marking a truly monumental economic shift for the athletes.
But that was just the beginning. Wages didn't just crawl up anymore, they absolutely exploded. Just 7 years after Johnny Haynes hit that £100 mark, Manchester United and Northern Ireland legend George Best secured a weekly wage that was reported to be 10 times that amount, a staggering £1,000 a week in 1968.
And with those uncapped, skyrocketing wages came a complete transformation in the social status of the players.
They were no longer working-class laborers trying to keep a broken-down 1961 Jaguar from overheating on the way to the pub. They became global icons, international celebrities with lavish tastes and the deep pockets to actually match them. The era of the superstar footballer and their supercars had officially dawned.
To really wrap our heads around this new, almost unimaginable wealth, let's look at a prime, tangible example from around the globe: the legendary Brazilian player Pelé. His car collection perfectly mirrors this skyrocketing trajectory of football wealth. Following his first World Cup win back in 1958, he was gifted a pretty modest Volkswagen Beetle. But as his fame and wealth grew to unprecedented levels, well, his garage evolved dramatically. He upgraded to a Mercedes 250 W114, then stepped up to a much more powerful, technologically advanced Mercedes 280 SE W108. He even secured a rare Aero Willys 2600. These vehicles weren't just about getting from point A to point B anymore. They were rolling trophies of a newly unleashed economic reality.
And this brilliantly illustrates the whole era shift we're talking about today. Think about it. On the one hand, you have Harry Redknapp, playing just before the real money kicked in, struggling to maintain an overheating 250-pound Jaguar that literally required police tows. On the other hand, just a few short years later, you have George Best, earning 1,000 pounds a week and driving a pristine, midnight blue 1971 V12 Jaguar E-Type. Best's Jaguar, packing 314 brake horsepower, was the ultimate status symbol of the era. To put that in perspective, that exact car was recently valued at auction between $95,000 and $143,000. The difference in their automotive reality is the exact difference the abolition of the wage cap created.
Let's move forward and see how this builds over the next couple of decades. Once that cap was gone, the sky was for sure the limit. By 1992, right as the modern Premier League era began, Liverpool's John Barnes was reported to be the first player to hit the next exponential milestone, earning a cool £10,000 per week.
And the trajectory? It just never stopped climbing. By the latter part of 2010, the sports world was totally stunned when Manchester United star Wayne Rooney reportedly signed a new deal worth a staggering £250,000 a week. From a rigid 20-pound cap in 1958 to £250,000 every single week, it firmly cemented the reality of the modern mega-wage, effectively transforming top players into one-man corporations.
So why does all this history actually matter to us today? Well, I think this quote from PFA Chairman Gordon Taylor really hits the nail on the head. When reflecting on the 50th anniversary of the maximum wage abolition, he reminded us of the core worker rights principle at the heart of this entire story. Footballers are entertainers, yes, but they are also professionals generating massive, massive revenue. No worker in any profession should be legally bound to earn only what an employer dictates when the open market clearly says they are worth infinitely more. The cars they drive, they're really just the shiny exterior of a much deeper, foundational victory for fair labor negotiation.
Which brings us full circle to a really provocative thought to wrap up our explainer today. As wages continue to skyrocket into the stratosphere and clubs have to navigate increasingly complex financial rules, those murmurs are returning. Will salaries and deals just continue to rise unconditionally? Or, after fighting so incredibly hard to abolish it back in 1961, will football authorities eventually impose a new salary cap or some kind of unofficial wage ceiling on the sport? It's a fascinating question, and one that will definitely dictate what kinds of supercars the next generation of players will be parking outside the stadiums. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.